We as sports fans have been lucky enough to see some of the greatest athletes, players, and competitors to ever play their respective sports. And with this will inevitably come the conversation of who is better than who, or who might perhaps be the best to ever do it. And that conversation has never been more heated or more relevant in recent times than when comparing Michael Jordan to LeBron James. Undoubtedly two of the best to ever do it in this game we call basketball. Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. LeBron James versus Michael Jordan. His airness versus the chosen one. The king versus the GOAT. And in this video, we will be trying to get to the bottom of that heated conversation that has been going on the last few years. And with that being said, this is not meant to disrespect any other players who have played the game, or even LeBron James himself. As many of you know, I fall into the camp that believes Michael Jordan is the greatest player to ever lace them up. So in this video, I will be making the case as to why Michael Jordan is better than LeBron James. So in this video, we will be looking at anything and everything, including accomplishments, awards, and accolades, stats and analytics, as well as doing our best to look at the competition they played with and against in their respective times. This will more than likely be a long video, but hopefully an entertaining and informational one. And I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's get started. Before we dive in, I want to go over what the format will consist of, as well as some basic terminology so that we are all on the same page. Ultimately, what we are trying to do is determine who is the better basketball player. What exactly do I mean by better, or how is this word commonly used in the sports world? I want to be clear. Simply having more of something does not make you better than another player. They can oftentimes be synonymous with each other and have a lot of overlap, but at the end of the day, they don't mean the same thing. It is called the greatest of all time, not the most of all time. People are not as impressed with accumulation as they are with dominance, whether statistically or in terms of winning. And I want to use a few clear-cut examples to prove what I'm saying. Frank Gore has more rushing yards than Barry Sanders and Adrian Peterson, but hardly anybody would ever think that Frank Gore is better than those two players. Jason Kidd only trails Magic Johnson by a few hundred points, but has more assists, rebounds, and steals than Magic does. However, you would be hard-pressed to find many people who think that Jason Kidd is a better point guard or player overall than Magic Johnson. Ultimately, what basketball fans, coaches, players, GMs are all trying to find is the most dominant players that they can. And that will be the key word that I am going to focus on. Who was more dominant during their time? Who had the most impressive seasons, games, runs, and stretches of their career? LeBron James has put up some incredible totals during his 21-year career. But more important than totals is winning and dominance. And I'm going to use a few more examples just so we're clear in terms of what I'm saying when making my arguments. Ask any Buffalo Bills fan and they would easily tell you they would trade 4 straight Super Bowl appearances just for 1 Super Bowl in their trophy case. I, as a Dallas Mavericks fan, can tell you I would easily shave off the last 5 years of Dirk's career for another ring and MVP, knowing full well that a lot of his totals would dip and maybe put him outside of the top 10 of the all-time scoring list. But what we are truly seeking is the pinnacle, is the peak of sports and basketball. With that being said, let's go over the format of what we will be covering. First, we will be going over awards, trophies, accolades, and achievements. We will then go over stats, advanced stats, and analytics. And lastly, I will take a dive into who they played with and against for their times. I'm only going to broadly cover these 3 topics because anything outside of this tends to get very subjective with too much nuance. Things like the eye test, legacy, and cultural impact are hard to gauge and don't translate very well to what is actually happening on the floor. So with that being said, let's get into the first part, which will be trophies, accolades, and achievements. Before we dive into trophies, awards, accolades, stats, and analytics, I want to bring up a few points that I think are key to remember as we go forward. For all of Jordan's accomplishments, whether they be trophies, accolades, or stats, they are essentially compressed into an 11-year time period. Remember that Jordan essentially missed the entirety of his sophomore season, as well as the year he came back the first time out of retirement. Jordan essentially has received no awards or accolades or places anywhere near the top in stats for those 2 seasons, meaning that essentially everything comes down to 11 full prime years that he played with the Bulls. On the other hand, I think it's important to remember that 4 out of the last of LeBron's 5 seasons, not counting this year as we are only 22 games in, as well as the COVID-shortened year, LeBron has failed to play 60 games, but yet will have many acknowledgments in terms of statistical rankings and awards. So it is important to note that we are essentially comparing 11 years to 20. Further, when we get into stats, it's important to remember the context of the positions that they play. No one truly expects a guard to have as many rebounds as a small forward. And even if we looked at things like assists, the game has changed in terms of allowing your best player to essentially control the ball and the offense almost entirely. I will go deeper into this context as we go through some of the stats. But for this section, I will be covering awards, trophies, and accolades, as well as looking at their statistical and analytical dominance, the times that they led the league in a particular category, their all-time ranks, and acknowledging any times that they finished top 10 in a particular category or stat. If neither of them reached the top 10, I will simply pick the next best season between the 2 of them, so we have something to go off of. Now, most of us are well aware of the bigger awards and accomplishments that these 2 players have achieved. And Jordan, in the most important categories, still edges out LeBron James. As we all know, Michael Jordan has 6 rings to LeBron's 4, as well as 6 finals MVPs to LeBron's 4. Michael Jordan has 5 league MVPs, while LeBron has 4, and they have each won a Rookie of the Year. In 20 years, LeBron James has achieved 26 All-League awards, and in essentially what is 11 full years on the Bulls, Michael Jordan achieved 21 All-League awards. with each having an all-rookie selection. Jordan 11 times has been nominated to an All-NBA team, with 10 of those being the first team and 1 second team, as well as 9 first-team All-Defenses. On the other hand, LeBron James has been nominated to 19 All-NBAs, 13 of those being first team, 3 second team, and 3 third team. 6 times he's been nominated to an All-Defensive selection, with 5 of those being first team and 1 second team. I think it is important to note that in terms of dominance and peaks, once again, Michael Jordan has 19 first-team selections compared to LeBron James's 18 first-team selections. Michael Jordan has also won a Defensive Player of the Year and also finished number 1 in defensive voting shares in 1997-1998. And while LeBron has not won a Defensive Player of the Year, he also one time finished number 1 in defensive voting shares. In terms of the basic categories that they have each led the league in for any given year, as we are all aware of, Michael Jordan has 10 scoring titles in terms of points per game. He also holds the highest career and postseason average for points per game. He has also 3 times led the league in steals per game. On the other hand, LeBron has only ever led the league twice in any category, with one of those being points per game and the other one being assists per game. Now, in terms of leading the league in accolades, that about sums up the majority of it. Outside of the 10 times Michael Jordan led the league in points per game, he also finished one time third in points per game his rookie year. Outside of his 3 steals per game championships, he had another 6 times being top 6 in steals per game. Outside of LeBron's only scoring title, he finished top 10 in scoring another 13 times. And outside of his 1 assist per game title, he finished top 10 in assists another 9 times. He also 6 times finished top 10 in steals per game. Michael Jordan also has 1 top 10 finish in assists per game as well. And in terms of the highest ranking for rebounds per game, LeBron James only once finished in the top 20 with a 15th ranking. And while both of them have the same blocks per game for their career, Michael Jordan actually finished for 2 years 16th and 17th respectively in the league, while LeBron James has never cracked the top 20. Now, as many of you know, I recently did a video comparing who was the better shooter between LeBron and Michael Jordan. LeBron James does have a slightly higher field goal percentage for his career. However, it should be noted that over a third of his shots come within 5 feet of the basket. And outside of 5 feet on average, Michael Jordan is the better shooter. I will link that video down below. It should also be noted that LeBron James is a slightly better three-point shooter in terms of percentages for their career, with Michael Jordan slightly edging out LeBron in the playoffs for three-point percentage, as well as being 3 percentage points higher in the finals. The interesting thing to note here is that between the two players, Jordan actually has the highest three-point percentage for any year, coming in at almost 43%, which was good enough to put him 11th in the league that year. LeBron James has never cracked the top 20 for a three-point percentage. And of course, LeBron leads either player in turnovers for a season with 347 in 2017-2018, which put him in second place for the league that year. What you are now seeing on your screen is essentially a complete summary of the total awards and honors that each player has received, as well as their basic statistics over their career up to this point. And before we move on to advanced stats and analytics, at the beginning of this section, I said I wanted to give a little more context to the rebounding and assist numbers between LeBron and Jordan. Yes, LeBron has averaged more rebounds per game for his career. Yes, he's had higher highs. Yes, he has averaged more assists per game for his career. And yes, he has done much more in terms of accomplishments and averages in that category. But I would like to dive a little deeper and give a little more context to that. For their position, Jordan being a guard, we are going to compare him to all point guards and shooting guards, and LeBron being a small forward, and we will compare him to small forwards and power forwards, as well as forwards overall, gives a little bit more of an insight to how good they each are relative to their position. Again, much like the field goal percentage, Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar have a much higher field goal percentage than Dirk, Bird, Nash, Durant, etc. But we would never say that Wilt or Kareem are better shooters than those players. There needs to be more context given. This is also true for the rebounding aspect of the game. No one would seriously expect a guard to have as good of rebounding numbers as a forward or center. And with that being said, it actually makes Jordan's block numbers even more impressive when comparing it to LeBron. But as for rebounding, Michael Jordan is essentially tied for 6th with Jason Kidd in terms of being one of the best rebounding guards of all time. He is only passed up by Tom Gola, Oscar Robertson, Jerry Sloan, Magic Johnson, and Russell Westbrook. So I think that is important to note. If we were going to put the stipulation that you must play a minimum of 400 games, LeBron James is the 13th best rebounding small forward of all time. If we include all forwards, I'm not even sure he makes the top 50 in terms of rebounds per game. And another small caveat that I would like to note is that it was only until very recently that LeBron James passed Michael Jordan in the offensive rebound category. Why do I bring this up? For the most part, when comparing offensive rebounds to defensive rebounds for the most part are much easier to collect. The team that has just shot the ball is usually retreating with 2 to 3 players. You typically already have inside position, and defensive rebounds, when compared to offensive rebounds, are much easier to come by. And with about 400 more total games played for LeBron James, he only has 17 more offensive rebounds for his career, which usually require a little bit more timing, tenacity, and effort, more so than defensive rebounds. Again, I'm not going to claim that Michael Jordan is a better rebounder overall than LeBron James, but I think this is important context. Secondly, I would like to take another look at assist. Again, would I argue that Jordan is as good of a passer and facilitator as LeBron James? No, I would not fully make that claim. However, in today's NBA, an offense does seem to run through a singular player more so than in the 90s and previous eras. Also keeping in mind, Jordan ran the triangle offense. And I only bring this up to say, what would it look like if Michael Jordan perhaps played in today's NBA in terms of the style of play that we largely see LeBron playing during his time in the early 2000s to now? Well, fortunately, we were given a very small sample size and a very small glimpse into what that may look like. For an 11-game stretch during the 1988-1989 season, Doug Collins decided to put MJ in at point guard over Sam Vincent, who was struggling to run the team's offense at the time. And what did Michael Jordan do during this 11-game stretch? He averaged a 30-point triple-double, along with 51% from the field and almost 3 steals per game, while also averaging his career average of 0.8 blocks per game. In those 11 games, he got 10 triple-doubles. Again, this is a small sample size, and I would never make the full claim that Michael Jordan is better at assists than LeBron James. But if Michael played in today's league, this is probably something along the lines of what it would look like. So now that we have gone over stats and given them as much context as possible, it's time to look at some more advanced stats and analytics. These are going to consist of PER, win shares, box plus minus, including offensive and defensive box plus minus, as well as value over replacement, and some other miscellaneous things such as game scores and any other notable stats that they have achieved in their career that stand out as being extraordinary. When looking at these analytics, the same rules will follow. I will go over their all-time ranks and any times they led the league in that particular category, as well as any other times they finished in the top 10. We will start with PER. In terms of their all-time rank for both playoffs and the regular season, Michael Jordan ranks first all-time in PER and is second all-time in the playoffs for PER. On the other side, LeBron James is third all-time rank with his PER and is fourth all-time in the playoffs with his PER. Jordan has 7 times led the league in PER and has 4 top 5 finishes other than that, including coming second in the league as a rookie in PER. On the other hand, LeBron has led the league only 6 times in PER, but does have 11 other times he finished in the top 10. And in terms of some of their more notable seasons, Michael Jordan has 7 of the top 50 PER seasons of all time, including 4 in the top 20. LeBron James has 6 of the top 50 PERs all time, including 4 in the top 25. Michael Jordan's best PER is good enough for 8th all time in terms of any singular season, whereas LeBron's best PER for a particular season was 9th. The next analytic we will look at will be win shares, and it is important to remember that win shares are accumulative. Michael Jordan is 5th all-time with 214.02 win shares, compared to LeBron James' 2nd all-time at 258.04. Michael Jordan 9 times led the league in win shares overall, along with another 2 times he came in 2nd place. LeBron James has 5 times led the league in win shares and has another 9 top 10 finishes. In terms of their best seasons for win shares, Michael Jordan's best season comes in at 9th overall compared to LeBron James' 17th. Michael Jordan also has 9 of the top 61 and 5 of the top 23 win shares of all time for any given season. LeBron James only has 3 of the top 30 all-time win share seasons, and his next best after that is at number 75. From here we will go into win shares per 48, which in my opinion is a much more accurate stat to assign players and better displays their dominance or how much they have contributed to a win. Michael Jordan's all-time win shares per 48 is number 1 in the history of the NBA. LeBron James comes in at 8th all-time for his win shares per 48. Michael Jordan 8 times led the league in win shares per 48, as well as another 3 times coming in the top 3. LeBron James only led the league 5 times in win shares per 48, and he has another 7 top 10 finishes. Some of their best seasons for win shares per 48, Michael Jordan comes in at 6 all-time for his best season, including 7 of the top 50 and 4 of the top 25 all-time seasons for win shares per 48. LeBron James actually has the 5th best win shares per 48 season of all time and has 4 in the top 15. However, after this, his next best is at number 82, so he has a bit of a drop-off there in terms of his top 4 to his 5th. All-time playoff ranking per 48 in terms of win shares, Michael Jordan comes in at 1st all-time, and LeBron James comes in at 3rd. We will now move on to box plus minus. Their all-time rank for box plus minus, Michael Jordan is 2nd, LeBron James is 3rd. 9 times Michael Jordan led the league in box plus minus with another 2 finishes in the top 2. LeBron James 7 times has led the league in box plus minus with another 11 times finishing in the top 10. And in terms of some of their best seasons, Michael Jordan's best box plus minus season was 5th, while LeBron James' best box plus minus season was 3rd. However, Michael Jordan has 7 of the top 30 seasons for box plus minus, 5 in the top 15, 3 in the top 10. LeBron James has 3 of the top 15 box plus minus seasons and 5 in the top 25. In terms of offensive box plus minus, their all-time ranks, Michael Jordan comes in at number 1, LeBron James comes in at number 2. Michael Jordan 9 times led the league in offensive box plus minus. He had another 2 finishes in the top 4. LeBron James 6 times has led the league in offensive box plus minus with another 12 times in the top 10. For defensive box plus minus all time, Jordan is 25th. LeBron James is 43rd all time for defensive box plus minus. 2 times Michael Jordan led the league in defensive box plus minus, and he has another 6 in the top 10. Only once has LeBron James led the league in defensive box plus minus, and he also has another 6 in the top 10. The last main analytic we will look at is value over replacement. Again, value over replacement is accumulative, much like win shares. Michael Jordan 9 times led the league in value over replacement, including 2 more top 2 finishes. LeBron James also led the league 9 times in value over replacement, and he has another 7 in the top 10. Their best seasons in terms of value over replacement, Michael Jordan has the number 1 season in value over replacement, and LeBron James comes in at the second best all-time season for value over replacement. Michael Jordan has 7 of the top 15 value over replacement seasons in the history of the NBA. LeBron James has 8 of the top 50 and 5 of the top 20. Now, in terms of the analytics we just covered, as well as including offensive and defensive win shares, this would be 61 times Michael Jordan has led the league in what is essentially 11 full years with the Bulls. On the other hand, LeBron James has only led the league 43 times in these same categories. From here, I'd like to talk about any other significant stats or accomplishments that either player has achieved that maybe do not have a specific award or accolade associated with them. The first one I want to look at is game score. I'm also going to put how many times LeBron and MJ scored 40, 50, and 60-point games respectively for the regular season and playoffs below. The first one I want to look at is game score. In the regular season, Michael Jordan scored 14 of the top 100 game scores in NBA history, including the number 1 and number 8 game score. LeBron, on the other hand, only has 3 out of the top 100 game scores in NBA history, with his best coming in at number 15. In the playoffs, Michael Jordan has 10 of the top 100 game scores, including number 4 and number 8 all time. LeBron James has a few more game scores in the top 100 with 13. However, his top game scores are 20, 24, and 31 respectively. In terms of other notable accomplishments between either player, I actually would like to start with LeBron James. In 2016, LeBron was the first player to ever lead his team in all 5 major categories in the finals. And it should also be noted that the year before that, he was the first player to lead a team in points, rebounds, and assists in a finals series as well. LeBron is also one of only a few players to ever lead his team in all 5 categories. Now, technically, Zydrunas Ilgauskas did average more blocks per game, but LeBron had the most blocks that year on the Cavs, so we will go ahead and give that one to him. It should also be noted, however, that Michael Jordan also led his team in 4 out of 5 categories as well, and he did it as a rookie. And then another interesting stat that I found, or someone had made this statistic for us, is someone compared LeBron's 2016 finals in terms of him leading all 5 categories, giving each category a scale of 100% for a 500% total, and compared it to any other time this had been done in the playoffs. Michael Jordan and LeBron are actually tied for the second most representation of a single player in all 5 categories in any playoff series. LeBron James appears 4 more times on this list, for a total of 6 out of the top 15 times. Michael Jordan makes an appearance on this list for 2 out of the top 15 times. Another notable accomplishment by Michael Jordan is that he is the only player to ever take home 5 honors, and he did it 4 times. This, of course, would be winning the championship, Finals MVP, a scoring title, first team All-Defense, and the MVP itself. And if you wanted to throw first team All-NBA onto that, that would be 4 times that he scooped up 6 honors in 1 year. And if we count one of the years he also was a steals champion, that would be 7 honors in 1 year. You can also throw in the fact that He has 9 times made the All-NBA, a scoring title, and first team All-Defense, which is very impressive. And again, this goes back to the dominance argument that I have made at the beginning of the video. And one other thing about Jordan that I think is notable is that he is the only player in NBA history to win a championship with only one other player averaging double digits. This is largely going to wrap up the accolades and achievements, as well as the statistical and analytical portion of the video. At the end of the video, I will do one big recap on this section in a screenshot or two. That way we can sort of see everything at once. From here, we're going to go into the most contentious part of this debate, and that is looking at who they played with and against, and trying to somewhat give us a picture of what the overall competition was like in their time. I am more specifically going to be focusing on playoffs and finals, which tends to be, at the bare minimum, a better crop of teams. And in terms of who they played with and against, we will largely be looking at All-Stars and Hall of Famers and trying to make sure we are as accurate with that and giving it as much context as possible. So that will wrap up this section, and let's go ahead and move into the next one. Now, as I said at the end of the last part of the video, this will easily be the most contentious part, and although I will try and be as objective as possible and lay down some simple standards and ground rules, this will be the most opinionated part of the video. Again, I will do my best to be fair and apply the same rules to both players. In this part of the video, we will first break down who they played with, then we will compare it to who they played against. We will be doing our best to identify all-stars, as well as perhaps any other notable players that should be mentioned. Now, in my opinion, I believe all-stars are a little more accurate than the term Hall of Famer. As an example, you can always get a Hall of Famer on your team, but they're not quite in their prime anymore. A good example of this is Jason Kidd playing with Dirk Nowitzki in 2011. Did Dirk technically play with another Hall of Famer? Yes. Did he play with Hall of Fame Jason Kidd? No. And so let's start with Michael Jordan. And more specifically, we will begin with Tony Kukoc. I have sometimes heard the argument or the claim made that Michael Jordan played with 3 other Hall of Famers, which again, as stated before, is technically true. But in regards to Tony Kukoc and Dennis Rodman, who we'll get into after this, Tony Kukoc largely got into the Hall of Fame based on his international play and his international achievements. And so again, I think it is misleading to say that Tony Kukoc is a Hall of Famer who played with Michael Jordan. When bringing up Tony Kukoc during the second three-peat that the Bulls had, Kukoc largely came off the bench. He never scored above 14 points and hardly ever got over 5 rebounds for any of the seasons during that second three-peat. So again, this would be a good example of applying more context to some of the base level arguments, whether for or against Jordan in this situation. That then brings us to Dennis Rodman. There's no doubt that Dennis Rodman was still one of the best rebounders in the league, averaging 15 or more rebounds for the second three-peat he was with the Bulls. And surprisingly, he was never an all-star either. However, his presence in the second three-peat cannot be understated. And so therefore, as opposed to Tony Kukoc, I would say that you got more of a Hall of Fame Dennis Rodman than you did Tony Kukoc. I think it's also important to note that when he left Chicago, his career quickly unraveled. And so exactly what kind of effect did Michael, Scottie, and Phil have on Rodman, keeping him in check for those 3 years, I'm not sure. But it is important to acknowledge the rebounding dominance and the interior post defense that Rodman brought the Bulls in their second three-peat. This, of course, inevitably brings us to Scottie Pippen. And what else is there to say about Scottie Pippen? One of the most versatile defenders and versatile players overall the league has ever seen, and his contributions cannot be understated. However, it is interesting that for only 4 of the 6 years that Jordan and the Bulls won a championship, Scottie Pippen was the only other All-Star that Michael Jordan had and played with on his team. Scottie Pippen had been an All-Star the year before they beat the Lakers for their first ring, but oddly enough was not an All-Star the next year when the Bulls won their first championship. Again, to me, I understand that Scottie is an All-Star caliber player, and the only other reason he didn't get an All-Star the year that they won their sixth championship was because he only played 44 games and was also hurt throughout the entire playoffs and finals when they won their last ring. So that being said, Scottie of course is an integral part of their championship run, and I will not sell him short in any way. And with that being said, these are the most important players to notice or that are brought up in this conversation the most, and I've given you my thoughts on them. And let's also remember that Kukoc and Rodman were only there for the second three-peat. During their first three-peat, Michael Jordan and Scottie essentially were the only two notable names in terms of this grander conversation we're having right now with the players that Michael played with. Other notable players that Jordan would have played with include Steve Kerr, Horace Grant, Luke Longley, Ron Harper, and B.J. Armstrong, along with several others. But in terms of the more notable players, Rodman and Scottie are about it, keeping in mind that Rodman was not there for the first three-peat, and neither was Tony Kukoc. Now, who Jordan played with is a little easier to sum up, as he only played for one team and largely had the same 1 to 2 players to discuss. Now, for LeBron, I will be looking at who he played with when he won championships or just got to the finals in general. And of course, after we look at who LeBron played with, we will go through and see who they each played against. And of course, that brings us to the 06-07 Cleveland Cavaliers. And I will give LeBron the slight nod here in terms of the players that he played with, but it's not as big of a difference as many would probably believe. Larry Hughes, only a year before, had been an all-defensive selection and steals leader, and Zydrunas Ilgauskas at this time had already been a 2-time All-Star. And I would probably say this team was not as overall talented as the ones that Jordan played with on average. Although again, I don't think it's as big of a difference as people would make it out to be. The next time that LeBron would go to the finals would of course be after the decision. And I think on an overall scale, there's almost no doubt that this was a much more talented team, especially at the top, than anything Michael Jordan played with. Dwayne Wade had already won a championship being the best player in the 2006 finals and had already been a several-time all-defensive selection, all-NBA player, as well as being an all-star for the years that LeBron played with him in Miami. LeBron also had the help of another 11-time all-star in Chris Bosh, who also made an all-NBA selection on his own. And so again, while I think it's close, I think that the talent on the 4 years that LeBron James went to the finals with the Miami Heat slightly edges out what Jordan played with during his 2 three-peats. Definitely during the first three-peat, it's much closer for the second three-peat, but in the end, having 2 bona fide All-Stars, largely in their prime, edges out having Scottie in his prime and getting Rodman sort of in the twilight of his career. This, of course, brings us to LeBron's second stint back in Cleveland, and obviously the most notable name here is Kyrie Irving, who at this point had already been to 3 All-Star games. And while he didn't go to an All-Star game technically during the 2015-2016 season, we sort of have a repeat of why Scottie Pippen also didn't make an All-Star team in the last year of their championship, and that is he only played 53 games. He was largely hurt and so therefore didn't make an All-Star nod. However, when he was healthy and in the playoffs, he played like an All-Star. He would be an All-Star the next year as well for 2016-2017. The next notable name for LeBron's second stint in Cleveland was Kevin Love. He had been an All-Star the year before in Minnesota, before LeBron came back. And although he would not be an All-Star for the first 2 years in Cleveland, he would be an All-Star for the third and fourth times that the Cleveland Cavaliers went to the finals during LeBron's second stint. So if we are going to sort of apply the same rules here, these would largely be 2 more All-Stars that LeBron played with while in Cleveland. It is important to note, however, that Kyrie Irving was not there for the 4th time that they went back to the finals in 2018-2019. And incredibly enough, they had 7 players score in double digits during the regular season on the 2014-2015 Cavs, while having 5 players score in double digits the next year, 4 players scoring in double digits during 2016-2017, while having an incredible 8 players scoring double digits on the 2017-2018 Cleveland Cavaliers roster. Other notable names that LeBron played with during his stint in Cleveland would be J.R. Smith, Kyle Korver, Tristan Thompson, and Jordan Clarkson, which many people forget about. So in terms of his second stint with Cleveland, I would say it's roughly the same as what Jordan on average played with, when considering Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, as well as some of the other good role players that he had, much like Jordan. And this of course brings us to the 2019-2020 season LeBron had with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, the obvious one with this team is Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis that year was first team All-NBA and first team All-Defense. He was 10th in the league in points per game and finished second in all defensive voting shares as well. He even finished 6th in the MVP voting that year. And in my opinion, is probably the best two-way player that either Jordan or LeBron played with, especially when looking at the 2019-2020 season. It cannot be understated how good Anthony Davis was in the regular season and in the playoffs, which we will get to here in a second. Other notable players would include Kyle Kuzma, Dwight Howard, and Rajon Rondo. Again, I would give a slight nod to this team having more talent overall when it comes to just how dominant Anthony Davis was for this regular season and playoffs specifically. But again, this one is very close. All in all, I would say that the amount of talent that they have played with is not that different. I don't think it is so much of a difference that it leans heavily one way or the other. I would say that compared to Jordan's first three-peat, on average, LeBron has played with more talent. In comparison to Jordan's second three-peat, it is much more even, with maybe some years going in Jordan's favor. But all in all, I would say it's been relatively even. And to be honest, I don't think this specifically is the more contentious part of this conversation between Michael and LeBron. The more contentious part is going to be the next part, which is looking at the talent that they played against. Before we dive into the competition aspect of this video, I would like to speak my piece on some of the argumentation that I hear between these two players. I hear a lot about how the athletes or players in LeBron's era are so much more superior or athletic or skilled than what Jordan faced during his time. I could maybe understand this argumentation if we were comparing the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, something of that nature, to the present day or the 90s and beyond. But as Jordan left the league, LeBron was coming into the league. And I don't really think that the athletic comparison or the skill comparison really holds any weight. If these guys maybe had 20 or 30 years between them, I could understand. But we're talking about two players where one had his rookie season the year following Jordan's final retirement. To act as if in that short time frame the athletes have become so much more advanced or have evolved to such a degree that there's a big difference is not an argument that I really buy into. And in terms of players today being more skilled, I don't think that holds much weight either. Again, the game has changed a lot in terms of the three-point shooting and the pace, which I think should be taken into account when discussing this topic. But I overall do not think the athletes are that much better these days, or the skill is that much better compared to Jordan's era. Some of the style is different, some of the pace is different, but when just looking at athletes and competition that they faced, I don't really think that this argument has a whole lot of merit to it. Again, this is my opinion, and you guys might disagree, which is all fine. But that's my 2 cents on that topic. As we begin to look at the competition that each player played against, I'm going to largely cover their playoff records and the amount of team wins their competition had, and then I'm going to get more specific in terms of their finals competition. So I first want to just simply look at win percentages for the teams that they each played during their playoffs and title runs. So first I want to broadly just cover the win percentages of the teams they played during the playoffs. In Jordan's 37 playoff series that he played all time, 27 out of 37 times he faced a team that had 50 wins or better. That would be 73% of his playoff series. He faced a minimum of a 50-win team. In the 53 total playoff series that LeBron has had, he has faced a 50-win team 28 out of those 53 times. And in terms of any shortened years, this also includes teams that would be on pace for a 50-win season. Of the 27 times Michael Jordan faced a 50-win or better team, he is 20-7 all time. That is a win percentage of 74%. Of the 28 times LeBron has faced a 50-win team or better, he is 16-12, which is good enough for 57%. If we strictly want to talk title runs, Michael Jordan has played a 50-win opponent 66% of the time in the years that he won his titles. LeBron has only faced a 50-win team 44% of the time during his title runs. And in terms of any time LeBron made a finals run, he faced 50-win teams 58% of the time. In terms of 60-win teams Michael Jordan faced on his finals runs, he faced a 60-win opponent 29% of the time. On all finals runs for LeBron, he faced a 60-win opponent only 15% of the time. And before we go any further, I would also like to reference another video I made in response to the claim that LeBron has won more playoff series as an underdog than Michael Jordan did. In that video, I essentially explained how Michael Jordan and LeBron have done this at the same clip and rate in terms of playoff series they were underdogs. The key difference in that statement, though, is that Michael Jordan has never lost as a top seed or being a higher ranked seed than his opponent. LeBron James has several times lost as the favorite and as the higher ranked seed in the playoffs. I will link that video down below along with the shooting video I referenced earlier in this video. So as we move along and compare who they played against specifically, I actually think that the beginning of their playoff careers have a lot of similarity, both being two young stars who did not have a lot of support around them, doing everything they could to get their team as far as possible. Now, as a rookie, Jordan put his team in the playoffs immediately. I know this was the expansion era, and you can make of that what you will. But Jordan was at a severe talent disadvantage in the first few years that he lost playoff series. Keeping in mind he was either an 8th or a 7th seed in what was at that time a stacked Eastern Conference. In Jordan's rookie year as a 7th seed, he would lose to the number 2 seeded Milwaukee Bucks. And for the next 5 years, he would either lose to Detroit or Boston, in which either Boston or Detroit would end up in the finals or win the championship itself. Teams that were absolutely stacked with all-stars, all defensive players, and Hall of Famers, including a Boston team that had 5 future Hall of Famers on it. Whereas early in LeBron's career, he would also lose to the Detroit Pistons, who had been to the finals in the last 2 years and won one of those. And when he did break through and get to the finals against San Antonio, he obviously ran into one of the all-time great teams, much like Jordan did early in his career against the Celtics and Pistons. And so I see the beginning of their 2 careers in the playoffs very similar in terms of not winning a title. And so before we start comparing when they each won their first championship, which would be Michael Jordan's 7th year and LeBron's 9th year respectively, up to the point of them each winning their first ring, LeBron has twice lost as the favorite or the team with more wins, losing to Orlando and the Dallas Mavericks in 2011, which is considered to be one of the greatest upsets of all time, And LeBron James was very underwhelming with his performance in that series. And something I would like for people to keep in mind, Jordan was always the best player on the floor when it came to the playoffs and the finals, even more specifically. Very rarely did anyone ever show him up or get the best of him, whether it was on his team or in terms of his opponents. However, there are several times in LeBron's career, for example, in 2011, where he is outplayed by some of his teammates and his competitors. In 2011, he was essentially outplayed by Dwayne Wade the whole series, and Chris Bosh also scored more points than LeBron in the finals that year. And so now that I have sort of given their overall playoff records, I want to dive into the finals a little bit more. And largely what I'm going to do here is look for all-star level talent. There will be the all-stars that were on the books that year, and then we will go through and try to, as basketball fans, best judge other notable players that should be given a nod in terms of their ability and skill level for the time that they either played with LeBron or Jordan or the competitors that they faced. Now, a lot of times I do hear people bringing up Hall of Famers that they have each played against, but Hall of Fame can be a little bit of a misleading title when discussing players in their prime or in the peak of their careers. For example, would we really say that LeBron played with Hall of Fame Rondo and Dwight Howard? I wouldn't quite put it like that. Would I say that LeBron played against Hall of Fame Jason Kidd? I wouldn't really say that either. Technically, Robert Parrish is a Hall of Famer and won a championship with Michael Jordan as well in 1997. However, I don't think that's very accurate or fair to label these kind of players as such. And another reason why the Hall of Fame label might not be fair is thinking about someone like Shawn Kemp. Shawn Kemp was a 6-time All-Star that Jordan faced in his prime and was definitely on his way to being in the Hall of Fame, but unfortunately due to injuries, he never quite lived up to that potential. But you could easily say that Michael Jordan faced a Hall of Fame worthy Shawn Kemp. And so I just don't think the Hall of Fame label is as accurate as people would like to think. I think trying to gauge how many players you played in their prime that were as close to all-star worthy as possible is more accurate. And so I will more specifically be looking at all-stars, and then I will explain the process for sort of adjusting who was an all-star in terms of on the books, and then who we as basketball fans might acknowledge as being an all-star level talent. And another stipulation I'm going to throw on this is that I would like for them to have at least played 20 to 25 minutes. And so largely what I've done here is I've gone through and I'm just simply going to look at who the official all-stars were the years that each player played in the finals. Surprisingly enough, Scottie Pippen was only an all-star for 4 out of the 6 years they won titles, and there are no other all-stars that Michael Jordan played with during his championship runs. Again, we will go back and adjust this later on so we can have more of an honest look. And the second part of this, when we adjust, will be a little subjective, but I will try to be as unbiased and as objective as possible. So if we count Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, for their 6 finals runs, they had a total of 10 All-Stars, which comes out to 1.7 All-Stars on average. Coincidentally, Michael Jordan also faced 10 All-Stars in terms of his competition for those same 6 years. This includes Worthy and Magic in 91, Clyde Drexler in 92, Dan Marley and Charles Barkley in 93, Shawn Kemp and Gary Payton in 96, Karl Malone and John Stockton in 97, and John Stockton actually didn't make an All-Star team in 98, and so Karl Malone is the only All-Star for that year. That comes out to a total of 10, which is a perfect 1.7 to 1.7 average. Now, if we were going to be honest and slightly adjust this, we would of course go ahead and say that Scottie Pippen was an all-star caliber player for those 6 years. And what we're going to do from here is give half an all-star to any player that I think is worthy in terms of their talent level. So essentially I'm going to give Rodman a half an all-star in their second three-peat. Again, I know this isn't exact, but we're trying to best gauge what the actual talent was that each played with or against. It's also important to keep in mind that Rodman had not made an all-star team for 4 years before he played for Chicago. If we adjust that for Michael, that comes out to an average of 2.25 All-Stars for his 6 finals runs. So if we go back to 91 with the Lakers, I think the 2 All-Star selections are still accurate. If we look at the 92 Portland Trail Blazers, they had players like Terry Porter, who was an All-Star the year before and after they played Chicago. Clifford Robinson, who was an All-Star 2 years after they played Chicago and was a 2-time All-Defensive team. He was also 6th Man of the Year in 92-93. Kevin Duckworth, who was also an All-Star the year before they played Chicago. And then you also have Buck Williams, who was a 3-time All-Star himself, albeit much earlier in his career, who was an all-defensive selection, as well as finishing top 10 in all-defensive voting shares for 3 out of the 4 years leading up to the 92 finals, and essentially had been a top 10 rebounder in the league for the majority of his career. Again, how much is all this worth? I'm simply going to give Portland one more All-Star for all of these players combined, which brings their total to 2. And again, they were a 57-win team and the number 1 team in the West that year. Now, when looking at the 93 Suns, they obviously had Charles Barkley and Dan Marley as All-Stars that year. However, I'm going to give a half an All-Star to Kevin Johnson as well. Kevin Johnson was an All-Star in 90-91, as well as being an All-Star the year after they played Chicago in the finals for 1994. He mainly was not an All-Star in 93 because, again, much like the Kyrie Irving and Scottie Pippen situation, he only played 49 games. In 96 versus the Seattle Supersonics, obviously Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp were All-Stars. Detlef Schrempf was also an All-Star the year before and after 1996. And so I will tack on a half an All-Star for the Seattle Supersonics as well. And in terms of Utah in 97-98, we're just going to stick with John Stockton and Karl Malone. That brings the adjusted All-Stars for Michael's opponents to 2.2. So again, Michael essentially having the same amount of talent with him that he played against. Also keeping in mind that Michael Jordan's opponents in the finals averaged 62 wins for the regular season and played the number 1 seed out of the West 5 out of the 6 times he went to the finals. If we look at LeBron James, he was the only All-Star on his team in 2007. Obviously, during the Heat days, you had 3 All-Stars for the 4 years he was there. In 2015, him and Kyrie were All-Stars on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Surprisingly enough, there was only 1 All-Star on the Cleveland Cavalier team in 2016, as Kevin Love would miss an All-Star selection and Kyrie Irving would be injured that year. In 2017, the Cleveland Cavaliers had 3 All-Stars, including LeBron James. In 2018, Kevin Love and LeBron James made the All-Star team for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And of course, in 2020, LeBron James and Anthony Davis made the All-Star team. In terms of All-Stars that they played against that were on the books, 2007, the Spurs only had 2 All-Stars. You had 1 All-Star in Dirk in 2011. In 2012, OKC had 2 All-Stars in Westbrook and Durant. In 2013, the Spurs only had 2 All-Stars. In 2014, the San Antonio Spurs only had 1 All-Star. In 2015, the Warriors would have 2 All-Stars in Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. The next year, the Warriors would have 3 when Draymond Green would make his first All-Star team. And then, of course, for the 2 years Kevin Durant was on the team, they had 4 each. In 2020, you had Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Remember, in 2020, they let Team Giannis and Team LeBron pick players. And incredibly, the amount of All-Stars that LeBron had on his team, including him for his 10 years making it to the finals, comes out to a total of 23, which is a 2.3 average in terms of All-Stars on his team. His opponents have the exact same amount to come out to a 2.3 average as well. And if we largely take out the 2 years with the Warriors when they picked up Kevin Durant, which I do not see as a blemish on LeBron's career, LeBron had the same or more All-Stars on his team 6 out of 10 times. Whereas Michael's opponents averaged 62 wins in terms of the teams he faced in the finals, LeBron's averaged 59. And in terms of trying to adjust for All-Stars, I'm going to go ahead and add a full All-Star to each of the times he played San Antonio, as they were just a great team overall. And players like Parker or Ginobili were not represented from time to time, as well as Kawhi Leonard coming into his own the 2 times they played them in 2013 and 2014, as well as Kawhi winning a Finals MVP. And for everyone else, I kept it as is. 1 All-Star for the Mavs, 2 for OKC, 2 for the first year they played the Warriors, as Draymond Green had not quite reached an All-Star level yet, although he was an intricate part of their first finals run. He then became an All-Star the next year and is represented. And then of course 4 All-Stars when they picked up Durant for the next 2 years. I was tempted to take away Bam, but I'm going to go ahead and leave him in. If we want to adjust for LeBron, I'm going to add half an All-Star in 2015. Keeping in mind that Kevin Love did not play in the 2015 finals. I'm going to add 1.5 All-Stars for 2016, as Kyrie Irving was absolutely phenomenal in the finals, as well as half an All-Star for Kevin Love, and I will keep 2017, 18, and 2020 the same. LeBron's adjusted average comes out to 2.5 All-Stars per finals run, including himself, and his opponents will come out to 2.6. So again, looking at the totals to the new adjusted totals, I'm actually giving LeBron the smallest of advantage here. And again, if you wanted to go back and adjust this how you would like, I don't think the numbers and the averages would come out much different. And again, this makes sense to me when you think about how the team dynamics have changed from the 90s to today. Jordan played in the new expansion era where essentially teams had 1 to 2 All-Stars or main players, while in LeBron's era with teams like Boston and him going to Miami, as well as Durant joining up with the Warriors, you sometimes have 3 or 4 All-Stars playing on the same team. But relative to their time, they played about the same level of top-end competition in the finals. And again, I know this is subjective, this is not necessarily scientific, but I wanted to do my best to look at each finals and somehow gauge the talent on their teams compared to who they played. And whereas Michael played the number 1 seed 5 out of 6 years out of the West, LeBron only 4 times played the number 1 seed out of the opposing conference. 3 times he played the number 2 seed, 2 times played the number 3 seed, and 1 time played the number 5 seed in Miami, who only had 44 wins in the regular season that year. And also it should be noted, the year they beat OKC, they only had 47 wins in the regular season. Michael Jordan never played a team below 57 wins. So in summary, from my perspective, Michael Jordan has been much more impressive on average in the playoffs and in the finals than LeBron, when looking at overall competition and what they did in the finals. Now I will say this, LeBron's win over Golden State in 2016 was very impressive. That is probably the most impressive finals win between each player. Also given the fact that they were down 3-1. But on average, I would say Michael's performance in the finals is almost flawless compared to LeBron's. And they overall played with the same amount of help, as well as playing against the same amount of competition relative to their times. From here, I'm going to go into a total summary and recap what we've discussed, as well as giving my final thoughts. I think that without a shadow of a doubt, we have proved that in his time, Michael Jordan dominated the league much more than LeBron did. Again, LeBron has put up some impressive totals that he has accumulated over his career. But in terms of leading the league, dominating the league, and reaching the peak more times without the lows, Michael Jordan clearly has LeBron beat in terms of this aspect of the game. And isn't that what we are truly discussing here? We are discussing who is the greatest of all time, or at least who is better between these two players. And when you take into account the fact that Michael Jordan accomplished what he did and dominated the way he did in essentially only 11 full years in the league, it is quite astonishing when comparing it to LeBron's 20-year career. The amount of times that Jordan led the league in a particular category, the amount of awards he has won, including championships, MVPs, and finals MVPs, as well as all NBA first team selections on both ends of the floor. And even though I didn't go into great detail in this video, I will probably come out with another video going into more detail about who LeBron and Jordan guarded specifically in their times, as this is another point that I hear brought up many times against Jordan. So again, in terms of being the best player in the league, leading the NBA in particular categories, being the front runner for statistics, analytics, and winning, Michael Jordan was simply better than LeBron has been in his entire 20-year career. And in terms of the things that LeBron does lead Jordan in, such as rebounds and assists, it's not that impressive when taking into account the positions they played, the pace of play in today's game, as well as how the offense is essentially run through a singular player these days, much more than in the 90s and previous eras. But again, taking that aside, Jordan's dominance is still much more superior than LeBron's. And one of the things that kind of seals it for me is this, and I mentioned this in the video. When it came to Jordan's time to win, in terms of him getting his first ring, compared to that first year LeBron was on the Heat, Michael Jordan never came down. Michael Jordan was always the best in the league, and he always won. He was essentially never outplayed by anyone on his team or his competition. However, there have been several times when LeBron has fell short, lost as the favorite, or has been outplayed by his own teammates or the competition. And even further, there have been several times when LeBron has been bailed out in his team's biggest moments, such as Ray Allen hitting a three, Anthony Davis leading LeBron in many categories and arguably was the better two-way player when they won their last championship, being outscored by Chris Bosh in 2011, Kyrie Irving hitting the three in Game 6 over Steph Curry, as well as his defense on Steph Curry. Not to mention times such as when Kawhi Leonard and Andre Iguodala, for the most part, held LeBron in check and caused him to struggle from the field and shoot a very subpar field goal percentage. We looked at their level of help and competition, and I really don't think there's much of a difference relative to their time periods. In the 90s, you essentially had 1 to 2 All-Stars on a team at the most. And in today's game, you can have anywhere from 2 to 4 All-Stars, which LeBron took advantage of many times. And real quick, I will address some of the complaints people have about Jordan retiring twice and quote-unquote not being there for his team. I think LeBron is just as guilty, if not possibly more guilty of this, when considering how he bounces from team to team, will take a new opportunity when it presents itself, and in many people's eyes, has sort of taken the easy way out when seeking to win his rings. And so in conclusion, this is not meant to tear down LeBron James or discredit the things he has done. He has easily had one of the best careers in NBA history. But in terms of this debate, I have to take a side. And after looking at everything and watching as much film as possible and comparing the two players, it is my opinion and belief that Michael Jordan was simply a better player. And so with that being said, I'm going to end this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and so any feedback or support is greatly appreciated. You guys check out some of my other videos, and as always, I will see you on the next one.
Jordan with 43. Malone is doubled. They swat at it and steal it.
Michael never clears, so Malone doesn't see him. He comes from the blind side and strips him. So 3 crucial plays here by Michael Jordan now.
Jordan, open. Chicago with the lead. That may have been, who knows what will unfold in the next several months, but that may have been the last shot Michael Jordan will ever take in the NBA. If that's the last image of Michael Jordan, how magnificent is it?
I don't think you can put it into words, Bob. I mean, what he's done here in this 4th period, you see the 16 points. He got about a minute's rest.
The Chicago Bulls sixth NBA championship, and it's their second three-peat.